very pleased to be able to play host to the Creative Industries Knowledge Transfer Network and the Technology Strategy Board coming together, because I think Cambridge has a lot of creativity and a lot of technical skills. We haven't married the two and reached out to the creative industries itself. So for me, partially, it's a one-day tutorial given by experts in the field, which I shall convert into an academic paper at some point and publish in my own name, which would be best practice. No, I won't do that. But Centre for Entrepreneurial Learning was formed formally in 2003, but it started, I was going to, that's my 10:30 alarm today, funny enough. We were something called the Higher Education Innovation Fund that sponsors entrepreneurship and enterprise across universities, and we benefited from some of that. Subsequently, we've grown it so that HIFE is about 30% of our income, so we're trying to be ourselves quite entrepreneurial. And through that, we have been developing here teaching or learning in the area of entrepreneurship, which we describe as education for entrepreneurship, distinct from education about entrepreneurship. Most business schools would be about entrepreneurship through case studies and theories and so forth. Ours is much more a hands-on approach to getting people to learn about this thing. So we have the portfolio that starts off by saying, so what is entrepreneurship? As a lecture series on Enterprise Tuesdays, which is about enterprise. It's on Tuesdays, during 2 terms. It's a whole series of talks that we give out. We started in a room with about 25, 30 people when Peter Hiscox first ever invited me. That now is, I think, sign of the times that we get anywhere between 200 to 300 people coming along to that, from right across the university, mostly masters and PhD students, because we think they're closer to unemployment than the undergrads, so that's what we target. But also they have technologies and they have research and they have knowledge, which we think if we can get them to think about commercializing would make much more impact. So that's the first step. The second one, we have a course called Enterprises, which is a residential course we developed at MIT, and that sits in that space that says, so is this for me, this entrepreneurship thing? I'm doing this very clever PhD or studies in something now. I need the confidence and the belief that this is where I can go with my ideas. So we bring together about 70, 80 of them together. And we spend 4 days with them on various creative activities, some silly, some very serious, but they basically learn in a very compressed way over 4 days the journey from the who am I, is this, what I want to do, to creativity, idea generation, validation, all the way through to elevator pitches. And 2 of our alumni are right here in the audience, very pleased to see them here. We then have another thing called Emerging Technology Entrepreneurship, E-Tech, which says, so when's an idea a business? I suspect we'll spend a whole day on that topic today, actually. And so for that, we take technologies that are emerging out of laboratories and we get students to do feasibility studies on them. So a mixture of creativity, where can this go, what markets, is it a platform, etc., through to, so who the hell's going to buy this and how many are there, what price will they pay? So hard nitty-gritty stuff that marketing folks should be getting familiar with. And then we have something called Management of Technology and Innovation. This is a whole new sort of business studies for master students that sits across evening lectures through the whole year. And that's a new thing for us that we've taken over from other colleagues. And finally, our flagship for the future is a postgraduate diploma in entrepreneurship, which is a 1-year part-time study. And that's 3 residential weeks in Cambridge. The rest of it is online. And I'm also hoping, therefore, to learn some tricks from the Rift Stream today of things that we can incorporate into making that even bigger and shinier and more viable. I never thought we could be doing entrepreneurship education other than in face-to-face contact, because it is a contact sport. But it looks like we're able to get across a lot of content online, but I would like to make that exciting as well. So those are kind of our flagship things, and then we do things like hosting today's event and various other ways of interacting and getting our students engaging with people from business. So that's us, and I'm hoping you're having a very good day at the Judge. Very briefly, this used to be a hospital. For those that are not Cambridge-based, it was set up by a man called Adam Brooks, and hence Adam Brooks Hospital. And then eventual design for this building apparently was inspired by Florence Nightingale when she came back from the Crimea. And hence it's a narrow building, so lots of fresh air and light can get through from all sides, east and west. This is a north-south structure. So there we are, and it's the architect who put this building together supposedly have been inspired by an Austrian, a Russian emigre to Austria called Hundertwasser, i.e. 100 colors. And so it's a slightly bizarre building, but a very attractive building, and I hope you get to walk around it and take some pictures. Welcome, Uday, and the rest of you here. Thank you.
Thanks, Shai.
How many people are members of the Creative Industries KTN? Quite a number. For those of you who are, just explain who we are. We are an agency which aims to be a kind of catalyst for innovation within the creative industries, enabled and driven by new technology. We work very closely with what is really the government, the only plank in the government's strategy for growth, which is the Technology Strategy Board, which invests very significant sums of public money across industry sectors, literally from kind of rocket science through healthcare, transport, the built environment to the creative industries. Our role is, if you like, to act as a kind of critical friend for the Technology Strategy Board. We try to engage with, as effectively as we can, with creative industries to understand what the needs, challenges and opportunities of businesses trying to scale up, to grow, to create services and products that people are passionate about. To then advise the Technology Strategy Board on the best way that they can invest in R&D programs to support that growth, and then in turn to try and re-engage creative businesses in Technology Strategy Board programs. There are two kind of key things running at the moment. One is the establishment of a new major technology innovation centre called the Catapult for the Connected Digital Economy, which will have a minimum of £50 million Technology Strategy Board investment over the next 5 years, and will open sometime early next year. The second, specifically focused on the creative industries, is a programme around convergence, which is a £2 million programme. We're just launching the second phase of that, which is around the development of tools which enable early stage development of cross-platform products. In addition to working with the Technology Strategy Board, we're working across kind of 4 key themes which we think are critical to growth in the creative economy at the moment. They are, as a primary theme, convergence, and today we've persuaded the TFB to run a program in that area. User-centered design, which we believe quite passionately is at the heart of all successful innovation in this sector, and arguably it's understanding users and understanding how to design beautiful interfaces for users that made Apple so successful. The third is business models, where I think, and again, the impact of technological innovation is to require a level of innovation in business models, which, I have to say, in many respects, creative industries have been reluctant to adopt, and as they try to shore up 20th century business models. And finally, the program that we're working with Uday on, which is around access to finance. And I think there have been no end of bodies from the CBI through Nesta, Demos, the government's own Creative Industry Council, which have identified access to finance as, which is a problem in the current economic climate for every business, particularly SMEs, but where there are particular issues, I think, that affect the creative industries, which is where there are a disproportionate number of micros and SMEs, many of whom have, they have a very varied kind of range of business models, outputs and products. Many of the people who are running creative businesses actually aren't terribly interested in running a business. They're just passionate about what it is they make. So there are, I think, particular challenges there in terms of education that's required, in terms of people wanting to run businesses that will scale up and grow. IP is something that I think a lot of investors are very reluctant to see as being a real asset that they can take as kind of equity in a return on the investment they make. So I think there are particular problems in terms of getting finance into creative businesses, and it's that challenge that we're working with Uday to address. And today's event, the Risk Stream, if you like, is kind of the alpha version of what we hope will become a catalyst for meetings, discussions, exchanges between people on both sides of this equation, the people who have the finance and the people who need it in order to scale their businesses up. As I say, this is a prototype. Thank you very much for coming and participating in it. We hope that you have a good day, and that that we will all benefit from today, but also this will lead towards the creation of something that's going to be quite significant. I'm going to now hand over to Uday to explain how it works.
I really wanted to set the scene. What do we want to try and get out of today? Because as Frank said, this is an experimental event. And we've been doing this kind of methodology inside corporates for the last 2 years, trying to put ideas together with technology to justify investment decisions. So this is a first, really, to say, can we do this in a public space? Can we curate an interaction between corporates and SMEs and investors in a public space? That's really what our objective today is. And so how will we know? What are we trying to do? What are the things we're trying to do? I think there are 3 key things. One is that we want to try and break down the barrier between the nerds and the lovies, to use paraphrase. Or we could refer more highbrow fashion to C.P. Snow's 1959 Reed lecture about how there were 2 cultures in this country. So that's one objective, is to try and get the creative and technology people talking to each other. And that's very, very important. The second one is that we want to try and break down silos. And when we were trying to put this event together, I had a conversation with several people whom I'd said, come and talk. And their first question was, well, I'm a technologist. Are you sure that I need to come, and is this relevant? And my answer was absolutely yes, because I want the creative people to learn about technologies coming down the pipe. And I also want the technologists to understand where the real challenges and problems are. So the second objective is breaking barriers, really, breaking silos. And then the third thing is we want this to be part of a process, not a single-shot event. And that's very important. So after this experimental riff stream, we're doing another one in York, in the north of England, on the 5th of July. And everything that happens, or most of what happens today, you'll notice being filmed. We want to put stuff up online, but we want to try and curate the content. So we want to try and, so the idea of a riff stream is actually a stream that we expect to run. And so the 2 events in the UK, and then we'll see how that goes. And from the learnings from these events, we'll then think about what else we might do. And whether, in fact, that this is an effective way of doing what we want to try and do. Okay, so that's by way of backdrop. And so the thing that I want to really talk about is about the challenges of creating businesses. So we all know that building businesses is hard, and Shai's talked about that, in which there's lots and lots of people who set up units, incubators, teams. But creative industries, we've got some additional challenges, and we know that only too well. And I've seen that in the last year as a result of taking on this role with Frank and trying to say, how do we get investment and finance into the industry? Which is that a lot of people in the creative industry are stuck in what I call the project mindset. So, and some of these are very big projects. You might find £20 million projects, but they're in Soho, you go down, there'll be somebody who's got a new special effects generator machine, but it's seen as a project rather than a sustainable business. So that's one challenge. The second thing is that, and we see this around us all the time, from Apple to Nokia to all the challenges, that technology affects everything, not just the act of creation, but the act of packaging, the act of distribution, and the act of consumption. And that poses a new set of challenges which are really quite historic. They're different from what we've previously had to cope with. And the third is consumer behavior is changing. And so the classical approach of doing a market study or a focus group and saying, what do people want, let's build it for them, is also fraught with difficulty. How many people in Apple's design team actually quite knew what the consumer wanted? They had a concept and idea and they pushed it out, and then they found people actually said, you know what, this is great. And of course, digital technology and media means that there's lots of moving parts, lots and lots of different things changing. Which makes life much, much harder. Now, I'm not going to bore you with too much detail, but this is a picture. So my brief first statement is that innovation is a messy business. It's governed by the diffusion equation. So you can't predict it. And for those of you who've studied, can still remember O-level maths, you'll know the top hat function, which is the distribution curve. And that's basically the diffusion equation. Think about gases, molecules, It's messy, and a pattern sort of emerges out of that. And what we're interested in here is the left-hand bit, because we don't want to discuss the decay and death of a business. We're interested in the growth bit. So we're interested in the left-hand side. And everything that we're trying to do around the creative industries initiatives are actually about intervening on the left-hand side. And there's a lot of content on riffstream.net that you can go and look at, which tries to explain that and talks about the challenges. The next thing really is, the big challenge isn't at the early stages. Most of you here have probably already got a prototype or have proved a concept. And that's great. The second thing is that people think that this is the area, once they've done that, they think they need to go and get venture capital money or large money. All that kind of heavy investment relies on stable business models, proper return on investment criteria, etc., which is the third chasm. So what we find in the UK, in Europe, and elsewhere in the world is the first chasm is well dealt with by university-funded R&D. The third chasm is dealt with by private money. The big problem is that middle bit in the second chasm. And that's where we're trying to put all our energy, because that relies on connecting everybody in this room to each other, to investors, to large corporates, to customers. And as my first boss said to me 25 years ago, the best kind of investment is money from your customers. So why Riffstream? What are we trying to do here? And we've kind of really been trying to stretch a musical analogy here a little bit. So think of a chord. Any guitar players here in this audience? So great, at least one here. So you think about, you can play a single chord, and a lot of the time when an innovator comes up with an idea, a new piece of technology, it's like a chord. And on its own, it's not going to do anything. But you need to basically mix with other chords. You need to add other chords to create a riff, which is like a preliminary start of a tune of some kind. Yes?
That doesn't apply to ACDC.
Yes, thank you very much for that intervention. And other groups we can talk about. So the idea is you riff and you create this idea of a riff, but a riff on its own is not going to create a complete composition. And so to do that, if you think about musicians who have a riff, they may go and practice in a pub, or they'll go to their local friends, and then you throw in other instruments, you throw in an audience, and so interaction, that's what it's about. So the idea behind this around Riffstream is to create a continuous ongoing dialogue between the people in this room and others we're going to co-opt later. And then I'm not going to talk through this picture, you'll be very pleased to hear, but it really shows that we've been doing a lot of detailed work on looking at the challenges involved in making this journey across the chasms, so that we can think about better ways of intervening and providing support for that intervention. And then, this is my favorite, which basically says you have to remember that life is very complicated. And actually, if you're in digital media, if you're in content and technology, you've got to think about 7 layers. The first layer, which many technologists forget to think about, is the customer. The second is what the customer actually consumes, which is a product or a service. That's what they're going to pay for. Behind that is stuff that actually helps them define that. Think about if you're watching a TV program, a controller. It's the data, it's the electronic program guide that is critical. You use that before you consume any content. Behind that's the actual content you consume. Behind that's the infrastructure, the pipework that maybe delivers a TV signal to your home or to anywhere else. And then behind that is the application technology, the piece of software that might basically run a web stream or whatever. And then behind that is the actual base technology. Now, of course, we have a challenge here because universities, including the one university down the road here, a lot of work is on base technologies. And so when you meet a researcher who's got a wonderful new algorithm for something, it's a long way from that to saying, where's the money? And that's the point, is there are lots and lots of layers. And if you're trying to do something, it's being aware of those and deciding where you want to play. So, final bit, really the 3 key steps if you're trying to do this is our view, is number 1, understand your ecosystem. So it means who else is playing in that market space with you. And you'll notice that the way we group things today, we're trying to build an ecosystem here of people. We're trying to get people in here who actually want to do business with each other, maybe invest in each other, want to do stuff. So that ecosystem is very, very important. And the second thing is how you actually couple things together. How do you connect the different pieces together? And finally, how do you actually understand where your position is, where in the value chain you're playing. Nokia didn't understand it, which is why they're in trouble. Apple, on the other hand, have done, which is why they've got £30 billion in the bank, in cash. Okay, so now, given that we started a little bit late, and I want to make sure that I'm not just up here talking forever, I think we're going to stop there. The full slides and people will use will all be up online on riftstream.net. We'll be communicating with you. But what I want to try and do now is the morning session. The idea is we're going to get some people who've been looking and thinking about these problems to come and tell you from their own perspective, usually a corporate perspective, sometimes from an academic perspective too, what they see. So you're going to hear a lot of differences of view and probably quite a lot of different points of view and maybe even some violent arguments, which I will welcome thoroughly.